Sharing Stories at Onondaga Lake by Ian Grimshaw. A young non-native girl named Jane arrives at Onondaga Lake with her family. Jane's family begins unpacking the car, ready to spend a relaxing day at Onondaga Lake. Jane, however, has plans to go fishing and rushes off with her fishing pole and tackle to find a good spot. Jane's father calls out to her as she takes off down to the shore to stay within sight of the family. As Jane gets closer to the shore of the lake, she notices a peculiar smell. Ew. Jane is unaware that the peculiar smell of Onondaga Lake comes from years of intentionally dumping toxins like mercury into the lake. Still hopeful to catch a fish, Jane settles down at a spot on the shore with her fishing pole in hand. After a short while, Jane wonders aloud if she will catch anything today. I wonder if I will catch any fish today. Unbeknownst to Jane, an elderly Onondaga man has overheard her and prepares to break the silence. In a calm and soothing voice, so as not to frighten the younger Jane, the man says, You may catch something, but make sure you do not eat it. Confused, Jane asks the man, Why? Are all the fish here sick? The man waits a moment before replying. Our relatives here are all sick. Not just the fish in the lake, but the plants and the trees, the animals and birds, even the lake herself. It is because of all the toxins and waste that was dumped into the lake. Unsure as to how or why someone would ever dump chemicals into the lake, Jane asked the man, Has the lake always been like this? Recognizing Jane's curiosity, the man gets up from his spot slightly further down the shore. He begins walking towards where Jane is sitting with her fishing pole. The man sits down close to Jane before beginning to answer her question. No, the lake has not always been this way. It was once overflowing with life, both inside the lake and the areas surrounding it. This lake is a sacred place for the Haudenosaunee, and my people, the Onondaga, were good stewards of the lake. Jane wonders what could have ever happened for the Onondaga to stop taking care of the lake and asks her new friend. The man explains to Jane that it became the way it is today after the people of New York took away the lake and surrounding area from the Onondaga many years ago. That the white man had dumped his waste into the lake, and that until all the waste is removed, everything in and surrounding the lake will continue to suffer. Visibly distraught, the man seeks to console young Jane. There. The man apologizes to Jane for upsetting her and tells her his name is Daniel. I'm sorry for upsetting you. My name is Daniel. Jane tells Daniel her name, and Daniel offers to share a story with Jane about how the lake came to be a sacred place for the Haudenosaunee, the League of Native Nations that his people, the Onondaga, belong to, and how the Haudenosaunee are trying to clean up the lake and restore it to the way it used to be. Jane, excited to hear such a story, tells Daniel, Yes, please! Forgetting her fishing pole at this point entirely, Jane turns her full attention towards Daniel and his storytelling. Daniel begins, speaking calmly and quietly at first, looking out across the lake as he does. One day, many years ago, many years even before Europeans, your ancestors, were discovered lost at sea on the shores of Turtle Island. It was during this way back time that some Haudenosaunee people had lost their ways of living in peace with one another. Life for many Haudenosaunee people had become very violent, and there was warfare between many native nations. According to the Haudenosaunee, Creator sent a person to end the violence. His name was Daganawida, also known to some as the Great Peacemaker. Daganawida began sharing his message of peace with others. Sometimes people call it the Great Law of Peace. The Great Law of Peace was meant to unite the Haudenosaunee people together once again. Daganawida knew that it would not be an easy task to unite all 5 warring nations of the Haudenosaunee. There were the Mohawk, known as the people of the Flint, the Oneida, known as the people of the upright stone, the Onondaga, known as the people of the hills, the Cayuga, known as the people of the great swamp, and the Seneca, known as the people of the great hill. At this point, Daniel pauses for a moment and realizes that Jane looks even more puzzled than before. Recognizing this, Daniel grabs his walking stick and begins to draw something in the sand. Jane, confused as to why Daniel has stopped telling his story to draw in the sand, asks Daniel what he is doing. "What are you doing, Daniel?" Daniel tells Jane that he is drawing a picture for her so she can better understand the story as he tells it. "I'm drawing the story for you, Jane." Ever the curious one, Jane adjusts herself to get a better look at what Daniel is drawing. What Jane sees is an assortment of 5 shapes connected with lines. Proud of his work, Daniel relaxes a moment before Jane proclaims, "That's not a story! Those are just simple shapes!" Daniel smiles and explains to Jane that those shapes represent the Hiawatha Belt, the flag of the Haudenosaunee. That this flag tells the same story visually that he is currently sharing with Jane verbally, about how the tribes came to be united together again as Haudenosaunee. Daniel points out each of the squares and how they each represent one of the 5 nations. That the middle one represents Onondaga, where they currently are, and that the story of the Haudenosaunee will always exist in this way to be told to those who will listen. You can always find the story in our flag. Daniel then connects the squares together with his walking stick, telling Jane that the lines represent the dedication to peace and cooperation between all the nations. Jane points out to Daniel that the middle symbol looks kind of like a tree. "That one looks like a tree!" Daniel smiles again and politely tells Jane, but we haven't yet gotten to that part of the story." Eager to resume the story, Jane asks Daniel, "May we continue the story?" Daniel nods and looks out across the water before returning to his story. Beginning in the east, Daganoweda first shared his message of peace with a woman named Jinkose from the Mohawk Nation. From there, Daganoweda and Jigonse traveled west to the Oneida. They then went around Onondaga to speak with the Cayuga, and then further west to speak with the Seneca. After they had shared the great law of peace with the Mohawk, Oneida, Cayuga, and Seneca, Daganoweda and Jinkose went back to Onondaga. Daganoweda knew that they could not have peace without Onondaga. We need Onondaga for lasting peace. This was complicated because the leader at Onondaga was Tadodaho. Tadodaho was known as being extremely violent, fierce beyond fierce, some say, and powerful beyond powerful. Daganoweda knew that they wouldn't be able to convince Onondaga to hear the great law of peace without dealing with Tadodaho. We need to convince Tadodaho that peace is a good thing. Daganoweda came with songs and children to speak to Tadodaho. Daganoweda offered Tadodaho a position to help and be responsible for all 5 nations of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. "We need your help and leadership, Tadodaho." Tadodaho was willing to accept the peace. "I will accept your offer." Daganoweda then gathered the 5 nations at Onondaga and laid out the great law of peace for founding the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. This, of course, took place right here on the shore of Onondaga Lake. Daganoweda then took a single arrow in his hand and told the nations gathered that a single arrow can be easily broken. And with that, Daganoweda broke it in his hands. Daganoweda then told those gathered, "If we take one arrow from each of the 5 nations and bound them together, no men can break that bundle." And he said to the nations, "Here is your strength." Daganoweda then had the warriors who were gathered uproot a great white pine tree. As the tree was felled, It left a gaping hole underneath it, under which a stream could be seen running. Naganawida then had all the warriors throw their weapons into the hole. The warriors then uplifted the great white pine tree back over the hole, and that tree became the symbol of peace for the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. Some call it the Tree of Peace. Daniel pauses for a moment, looking towards Jane to make sure she is following. Jane immediately points back at the Hiawatha Belt and proclaims, "That's the Tree of Peace!" Daniel smiles and nods, picking up his story again. And Naganawida told the nations that the young men would play lacrosse to entertain the Creator. And the nations now knew that it is not warfare that entertains the Creator, it is the game of lacrosse. Naganawida also told the nations that the earth is female, and that their lineage would follow the female side. That their identity would be based on who their mother is, and not who their father is. The nations knew that the responsibilities of the women has everything to do with watching over the land, to determine who will be the leaders. And for many years, there was a great peace amongst the nations on Turtle Island. Great confederacies of nations would gather and sit in council. Millions of people were here. Great civilizations were here. Daniel pauses for a moment, overcome with emotion. Jane politely says, "So that is why this place is so special to you?" Daniel nods and says, "Jane, that is why this place is special for all our relatives. And that is why we have a responsibility to clean the lake, so that it will continue to be a place for sharing stories. For learning about respecting the sacredness of the lake, and how to have a relationship with it. That if enough people know the stories, that one day the lake will be safe again to drink water from, and to eat the fish that live here. And through this, we will begin the healing process, not only for the lake, but for all of our relatives." Jane smiles and looks out across the lake. Jane asks Daniel enthusiastically, "How can I help?" Daniel replies that, "In sharing this story with others, you can help to bring our relatives together again, to unite the different nations, much like Naganawida in a great peace, one which respects the relationship between all of our relations, animals, plants, fish, birds, and the lake herself." Daniel asks Jane if she thinks she can do that. "Will you help me to share these stories, Jane?" Jane replies excitedly, "Why, yes, of course I will. Can I come back for more stories?" And asks Daniel if she can come back another time to hear more stories about the lake, the Haudenosaunee, and of lacrosse. Daniel responds, "Certainly," smiling again at his new friend. "You can always come to Ska No, the Great Law of Peace Center," Daniel says as he points towards the building. "It sits there at the edge of the lake, and you can find me there if you would like to hear more stories, but only if you'd agree to bring a friend or your family with you, someone else to share the stories with." By now, the day is getting late, and Jane's family is packing up the car. Jane's father calls out that it's time to get ready to go home, but Jane is off in her own world, imagining all the people she wants to share Daniel's story with. She imagines what the lake will look like once everyone has heard the stories of the Haudenosaunee, and about how important the lake is. Daniel smiles as he watches Jane imagine a brighter future. Daniel rouses Jane from her fantasy to tell her he thinks it's time for her to head home, handing Jane her fishing pole as he does this. "Jane, I think it's time to go home." As Jane runs back to her family and waves goodbye to Daniel, Daniel smiles and looks back out over the lake. content for today in sharing his story with the next generation of water protectors.